Hello, everybody. We've just been waiting for people to join the webinar. My name is Tim Osler. I'm the head of UK marketing at GFT. You've just been watching some slides about GFT. Hopefully everybody has heard of GFT and knows who we are. We're one of the leading global technology engineering firms, been helping clients for over 30 years with their technology. And we're a strategic partner with Google. So we normally host these events at Google, their offices in London, and we've had some very successful events in the past, but due to these current circumstances, we've taken this event online. So we're very pleased that we've not only got the normal number that we would expect for one of these events, but we've actually got double the number of people attending, which is fantastic. So welcome to everybody to our webinar. As you may have seen, as we were looping through the agenda for this afternoon, we're going to have an introduction from Google. So I'm delighted that we've got a senior member of the Google management team here to talk about the next generation of cloud and where Google is heading. We're then going to examine the challenges that many of us have seen with migrating to cloud. It's just not as easy as everybody thinks it might be. We're then going to cover Tranquility Base, which is the open source solution that we've designed, to create to accelerate people's journey to the cloud. And then the exciting part, we're actually going to see a live demonstration of how easy it is to install Tranquility Base and really accelerate that journey, enabling people to get to the cloud in minutes, not months. And then we're going to just cover the future of, well, what does the future hold for the technology and for the software? And then we'll go to Q&A and we'll make that run as long as possible. So if anybody has got questions, you can type questions as we go through the presentation. And if they're simple ones, we may respond in text as we go through the presentation, or we'll actually answer all the questions at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bruno Heiser, who is the UK partnership lead at Google Cloud, who's just going to give us a little bit of introduction about where Google is. So, Bruno.
Great, thanks, Tim. Thanks very much. Perfect. So, look, super excited to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and great to see that we have been joined by so many people. As Tim said, we usually like to do this in our offices, so this is a little bit different, and maybe just acknowledge just the unusual times we're living through, and just to say and acknowledge that our hearts go out to those people affected, and people who whose lives have been thrown up in turmoil, and businesses have been disrupted. So from a Google standpoint, our stance in this is very much wanting to help and serve our communities and our customers first, and indeed we're trying as much as we can across the organization to bring our resources to bear. So perhaps just acknowledge that up front, and acknowledge that it's unfortunate that we're having to do this. Nonetheless, very pleased to be able to kick off this with GFT. If there is one partner I've been super excited about over the last year or so, it's been with the stuff that we've been doing with GFT, and just the strides they've made. So hopefully you'll get to see all the very cool stuff that they've been doing. For me, one of the reasons I particularly like the alignment between our two companies is that I think we stand for very similar things. So GFT to me is very engineering driven, so strong engineering expertise. I love the commitment to open source, and I think the Tranquility Base demo that you'll see has been open source, which is fantastic, very much ties with our values. And probably most importantly is just a fantastic client focus, and the fact that there's this commitment to always deliver and meet clients' needs. So I'm very excited to be partnering with GFT, and for you to all see the great stuff that we've been doing together. For me, being on video conference or doing webinars feels quite normal. Google, we work remotely a lot. We've got great collaboration tools, so this doesn't feel quite as weird as it might feel for some people. But I thought I'd just maybe, before we dive into the detail, just outline a little bit about the way Google thinks and approaches cloud. So we really see cloud in three waves. The first wave was the clouds that were built for the SaaS vendors, the early SaaS vendors like Salesforce, who essentially changed an on-prem licensing model to a subscription model where you access the software, you access the service. Famously, Salesforce had the no software slogan. You access their service through a browser. So I think that was really the first generation of cloud. It wasn't even called cloud. It was very much enabling people to access subscription services, and the early days of the SaaS players pioneered that. And then I think the second wave was what you saw very much invented by Amazon and AWS, with AWS, which was renting out spare storage and compute capacity. And in many ways was revolutionary. I think one of the ways in particular it was revolutionary, having launched a startup myself pre-AWS days, was it allowed people and entrepreneurs to spin up new businesses super quickly, super easily, without having to worry about provisioning and building out all the infrastructure that you needed. I think in the corporate world, a lot of what we saw in that wave was people shifting workloads that they were running on-prem in VMs onto VMs in the cloud, and arguably didn't lead to the level of transformation that was promised from cloud. And so I think as we move into what we think is the third wave of cloud, we really start to see the promise of cloud coming true. And for us, that means being able to do things that just weren't possible at all with any sort of infrastructure before. And so the sorts of things that we see our clients doing are using our auto ML capabilities. And this is essentially the ability to go and rent machine learning models, pre-built models, to train them very quickly and easily using data. So you don't need to be a data scientist, you don't need to build big data pipes. You can just train a model easily by showing it a bunch of data and then having the model, deploying the model using a few lines of code. That before was never really achievable. We also see clients using our contact center AI capability, where we've now got speech-to-text models with such high levels of fidelity that you can run 60–80% of call center queries through them with higher levels of satisfaction than you would otherwise get with human agents. We see the ability to access burstable compute power. One of our clients was responsible for rendering the Lion King, and they had to change the color of one of the characters over a weekend, and so they were able to rent 1 million preemptible VMs over the weekend to do that rendering super quickly, super cost efficiently. So you see us being able to deliver capabilities and solve problems that just weren't even considered. And I think that's what's really, really exciting. And that's why moving to the cloud and being able to use the capabilities that you've got the cloud, I think is going to be even more of a competitive differentiator. Because if you're able to access capabilities which your competitors can't, you're going to be in so much of a stronger position to be able to redefine your markets and offer customers and consumers propositions which were just unthought of before. So with that, I'll hand over to the GFT team, who will take you through the Tranquility base offering.
Thanks, Bruno. Thanks for that inspirational thoughts about what the future of cloud can hold and create for people. I'd now like to hand over to Carl Havard, who is our GFT head of Google Alliance, who's going to tell us actually it's a bit trickier than some people might think. Carl?
Thanks, Tim, and also thanks Bruno for articulating the appeal of what cloud offers today. So that third wave is is attractive to everybody. So Tim, if you could start flicking to the next slide. So that appeal, if we imagine ourselves standing where that little person is on one side of the chasm, then you look across the way, that's the third wave of cloud and all the potential that it holds to everybody. and it's very appealing for all organizations to want to move over to that way. But as Tim outlined, it's not easy. In fact, there's a lot of analyst stats now which are saying that the journey itself is very difficult. And one stat I think is very clear from IDG is saying that 51%, just over half of organizations that embark on their IT transformation / cloud migration journey either fail or stall. That's affectionately known in the industry as a number of things, depending on where you come from. So some call that as the frozen middle. Some call it the digital deadlock. We like to call it the cloud chasm, because it is a real journey from left to right. And if you imagine that on the left-hand side, if you're a traditional business, I guess, that's grown up over the years, built their own internal infrastructure, and have a strong emotional attached to it potentially, then you're very much on the left-hand side. A digital native's already there on the right, but with this ability of all the functionality and capability and agility that cloud can offer you, then most organizations, I think, are on their journey already, or wanting to move from one side to the other. So it's interesting to see, and we've worked with obviously many organizations over the years, obviously the last 5 or 6 years when cloud became a thing, was that, people move to the edge of this chasm, and what do? So a lot of organizations in the early days did nothing. They thought, is this cloud thing actually a thing? And let's just watch the world go by, and then realizing actually that the act of not doing anything was an issue for them. So inertia wasn't an option. They had to do something. So, and depending on how far these organizations could jump, whether they could reach the other side, do we jump without a plan and make it up as we go along? Some may call that agile, to be slightly cynical, or do we jump with a plan and maybe we do make it across to the other side? However, getting to the other side is not the objective. Realistically, most organizations have a lot of real estate they want to keep hold of in their own legacy internal on-premise infrastructure, in their data centers, etc. So actually they need to go from one side to the other. So obviously the option there, and the sensible option that we would naturally back is to build a bridge, because you do need to go backwards and forwards. The challenge is, though, building a bridge is great, but everybody has a different approach to building a bridge. And therefore, the construct of that bridge and how you're going to move from left to right and then backwards and forwards is going to be different for each organization. And that actually is a challenge. And the many variables and considerations that organizations have to, I guess, encounter, everyone's starting from a different, call it start point, where they're moving from this legacy infrastructure which has been built up over the years, a bit like that rickety bridge on the left-hand side. A lot of love and attention and attachment has been put into that bridge, and when it was built at the various times, years ago, it served its purpose. However, with things like security and compliance changing, the need to bake that in from the very beginning, DevOps teams becoming wider, requiring more multidisciplinary skills, they need coordinating. Can we get to a point where we start to design common patterns of infrastructure, or do we still make it up each time as we go? Can we move those legacy mindsets from the infrastructure world on premise to a cloud way of working? And can we break that emotional attachment that organizations certainly have? And here's an image that represents that. It's one of the most common things we have seen is to take that standard, I look after the infrastructure, I build the software, I guess, ways of working and mindsets, and then lift and shift that into the cloud. So nothing really changes other than the compute skills. Actually, this is an opportunity to do something transformation, because infrastructure and software, when you're programming on the cloud, is obviously one of the same thing. So as well as building the bridge, what we've recognized, and the 49% have understood this, these are the ones that have done it in a successful way, it's not just the physical building of the bridge, it's actually how you get backwards and forwards, and recognizing that you do need to go backwards and forwards on a regular basis. So over the years, we've worked with many organisations, and we've built many bridges and helped organisations build these bridges. As I said previously, they are all of a different construct, but ultimately they're still a bridge. So there must be a way to help organisations to be able to get some form of opinionated view of building out a landing zone on Google Cloud, for example. Can we build reference architectures with a common pattern? So we recognise that even though there were subtle differences, organisations are all in the same boat. So there's probably something we could do as an organisation to help our clients, to also help other organisations and maybe other consultancies as well. So over the years, what we've done, if you could print out, we've addressed some of these issues of, could we build out a landing zone? And we've learned so by doing it in the toughest environments, and predominantly in the financial services industry. And we've gone through the time-consuming compliance and security processes, making sure the CISO's happy and everything's okay in the CISO's world, conforming to ITIL, helping organizations move from development into production environments, so helping with the DevOps pipelines and making sure that's a slick process, rather than building a POC, proving that, yeah, that POC is great, but then having to start from square one again, because you've got to build in the security compliance again when you want to go to production. How do we manage multi-zones and regions, and how do we build things on top of a landing zone, like high performance grid computing, data warehousing, machine learning, and some of the other things which Bruno mentioned previously to this. So over the years, we've sort of recognized that these things need to be addressed, and things take longer than expected, probably cost more than they need to, and repeatability and consistency was a challenge. So through this process, we built up a set of tools, actually, which helped ourselves, but also helped our clients too, in order to eliminate some of these issues, to make things slicker, but also to bring consistency and conformity across the business. So if something was built originally in one area and it was already pre-approved, why have to go through that process again? Why can't you actually put something in place to automate that pre-approved reference architecture, etc.? And the ultimate objective was to help organizations reduce the time to cloud, and actually get time to value reduced too, so organizations can actually get the benefits of the cloud much faster than they typically would. So that gave birth to what you're going to see in a moment, and the magic will appear before your eyes, is what we've called Tranquility Base. And there's a little statement here: because we were good citizens, we made it open source. Obviously there is that, because everybody is trying to migrate and move to the cloud in a certain way, trying to set up their home on Google Cloud, etc., and build a landing zone. So that's why we made it open source, to make it accessible. But also we recognize that we can't do this all ourselves, and actually if we open up to the development community, which you're all welcome to join on GitHub, then we can start to help each other and start to develop some of this technology in a much faster pace as well. So what does Tranquility Base do then, before we go into the live demo? Well, it enables you to build out a landing zone in minutes and not months. I mean, it's important to share what we believe a landing zone is. It's an opinionated view, but you'll see as it unfolds, it's quite an in-depth, functionally rich and robust landing zone, which then leads us into the concept of data centers as a code, but I won't steal anyone's thunder by explaining what that is at the moment, but also allows you to build out a series of reference architectures, which include the DevOps pipelines, building things like Jenkins involved with that, in order to move into Tranquility Base and then easily deploy those across the cloud in easy ways. Brings in fully ITIL compliant environments, and therefore we start to get to a point where we build out this best practice into the code itself, with security and everything built in. And because it's open source, there's no vendor lock-in. So that hopefully sets the scene of what Tranquility Base, where it come from and what it does. If I can hand over now to Andrew and Scott, who will take you through the live demo.
Great, thanks, Carl. So what we're going to see, Scott and I will do this together. We're going to flick between some slides and actually then go onto the Google Cloud Console and actually install it while we speak. So I'll just first describe sort of high level what we're going to do, and then we'll go into each step. So in the demo, we assume there's an organization already created, your organization, but it's essentially empty. And there's a small kind of prerequisite process that we have to do in order to enable a small number of APIs to do the installation and to give that user the permission to install from Marketplace. And then what we'll do is we'll go into, once the prerequisites are done, we'll go into Marketplace, and Scott will show you that. There's a small number of fields that need to be entered again, and that will build out the kind of landing zone base project, which is essentially is a Terraform server. Once that's built, which takes about 5 minutes, then we'll go into that server and we'll kick off the next stage, what's called the unboxing, the step 3, the landing zone unboxing. And there we start creating quite a lot of infrastructure for the network, for the landing zone, such as networks, firewalls, internet gateways, those kind of things. And that part, the unboxing part, takes about 25 minutes. So in traditional style, we have prepared one earlier, so we will show you the unboxing. But in order to keep the progress of the demo, we'll switch to the pre-built one. And then at the end of that process, we'll fire up something called the Eagle console. And the Eagle console is a user interface that you can then use either as admins to carry on building out the landing zone and data centers code, or if you're developers, you can go into what we call an activator store. And activators are kind of reference architectures. And you can deploy those pre-approved, pre-built, written in Terraform code infrastructure, kind of application architectures. So as Carl mentioned, things like high performance compute or ML pipelines, there's a reasonable variety already. And the Eagle console is not something we're going to go into in a lot of detail. We'll go into that in another webinar. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to just quickly introduce step 1, and then we're going to get straight into the demo, and everyone can cross their fingers, and we hope the demo will work fine. So just looking at the diagram at the top. So we're going to go into the Cloud Shell, and again, Scott will introduce that, and we're going to run a script, and what that creates is the Bootstrap project, which, as I said, gives some IAM roles in order to be able to do the Marketplace installation, and enables a small number of APIs. And that script is run from GitHub, which you can see the address at the bottom. So let's get on with the demo, Scott.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm now in the Google Cloud Console. This is the GUI interface. I'll run through a bit of this explaining what it is, but first of all, I'm going to run the demo script. This is a little script that I put together to make sure that I get everything right. But normally you do this manually. If I kick the script off, we will first download the config creator from the Tranquility base GitHub repo. This is the Linux command to do this. That's downloaded. Then we have to make that file executable. Again, this is a standard Linux command. That's now executable. Then we have to get to run the script. We have to put in a couple of switches. The first is to get the folder ID of the folder into which we are going to deploy Tranquility Base, and also the billing account ID. I'm going to start the script now, and then I'm going to go back and show you where I get these. So the folder ID, the folder ID we can get through the browser, through the project and folder browser. And so we have the billing ID there. We copy that across into the script, and the billing ID. There's a single billing account that all the billing rolls up into, and this is the billing account. So we would have copied that across into here whilst executing the script. The script is creating the Bootstrap project. This is the project into which the Tranquility base and the Terraform server will be deployed. We need to create a service account. A service account is going to be is a machine account that we're going to be using to deploy the rest of Tranquility base, and we have to apply some permissions at the project level, at the folder level, and on the billing account to enable us to do all of this. We've applied the minimum permissions needed to do this. We've also created or enabled rather a number of APIs that are needed within the project to be able to deploy Tranquility base. You can see this is now working through. We're enabling IAM policies on the project level and the folder level, and it's been added to the billing account. Whilst we wait for this to complete, I'll give you a bit more information about what you can see here. We are running in what's known as the Google Cloud Shell. This is this is actually a Kubernetes container running within Google Cloud. It's a Linux environment, and this enables you to interact from the command line with your Google Cloud resources and your Google Cloud organization. If you go over to the burger here, you'll see we have Marketplace here. This is we will later be launching Tranquility base from Marketplace. This is akin to your Apple App Store or your Google Play App Store, and we have lots of lots of menu items down here. Just go into one. You see all of these different aspects of the compute engine that you can configure manually, from databases and storage, networking, operations, IAM tools. But what Tranquility base does is it uses infrastructure as code to deploy and codify all of those menu steps. We'll see this more in action once we get to the next step. So over to Andrew.
Thanks, Scott. Whilst that script is running, let's just recap on step one, which is preparing the basic project for the marketplace installation. So if we look at the diagram on the top left, we're running the script in the Cloud Shell, and what that's doing is creating that Bootstrap project under the folder ID that Scott provided. And again, just to recap, it's creating the service account, and it's creating or enabling the minimum number of APIs to allow the marketplace installation to install the next step. So if we can just go on to the next slide. So just to intro what we're going to do when we go into Marketplace. So again, if we look at the diagram on the top left-hand side, we're going to go into Marketplace. We're going to use Deployment Manager to deploy Google Deployment Manager to deploy the next stage, and we just need to type in a few bits of information there, and that's actually now going to start installing infrastructure. So we're going to create the things you can see in the diagram, like the NAT gateway, subnets, firewall rules, and routes. But the key thing that we're installing is a compute engine, a virtual machine that will run the Terraform server. And once that's installed, we will then be able to SSH via remote access into that Terraform server. And that again is all fully secured. We're using IAP, Internet Aware Proxy, and that will allow us to authenticate and go into the Terraform server. So let's switch back to Scott, and the script should have finished by now.
Thank you, Andrew. And yes, the script has completed. Now we will go into Marketplace to launch the Tranquility base application into the Bootstrap project that we've just created in this step here. Marketplace is available through the navigation menu. I have it already open here. So this is the Tranquility base application that's stored within Marketplace. If we launch this, it will come up with a second screen into which we have to insert some information. The Tranquility base -3 you see here is the deployment name. This is the name of the deployment that is logged with the Google Deployment Manager. We have selected Europe West 2. This is the London region, and this is where the Bootstrap project is installed. We could have deployed the Bootstrap project into any other region across the globe, but we chose London instead. I will have to change to the project that we've just created, the Bootstrap project. That's there, and then we will then, whilst that's chugging along, we will go and get the building ID. This is the same building ID that we used in the last script. We'll paste that into here. We also have to select the folder ID. This is the folder into which we deployed the Bootstrap project. So we'll go and copy that into there, and then we click deploy. And this calls the script from Marketplace and deploys the necessary components into the Bootstrap project, which includes the Terraform server that contains all the code for Tranquility base. This comes from an image that we version and that we store within Marketplace. It contains all the Terraform code we need, includes all the code for the Eagle console that we'll learn a bit about later. It also includes all the Terraform provisioner, so it doesn't have to download anything from the internet. If we have a look through, we'll see that this script is deploying a Bootstrap network into the Bootstrap project. It has the subnetwork that it's also deploying. It's deploying the HA NAT gateway. All these things you saw on the diagram earlier that Andrew walked you through. And then there's a few other things that we have to configure at the same time. Firewall rules, some configuration of the NAT gateway is being created using the script. It has a managed instant group that contains a couple of VMs, and it looks like we're very close to finishing. And when this is finished, it will then come up with a SSH button here, and then I'll be able to SSH via identity-aware proxy into the Terraform server. Then I will be able to launch the Terraform code to be able to deploy the rest of the landing zone.
Stage 2 will download from Marketplace. That's what's going on at the moment, and it will create the Terraform server. And what we're going to do is we're just going to look at the top left box in this diagram. So the Terraform server is something that we're going to SSH into shortly if everything keeps working. And that Terraform script will then kick off, and it goes into the creates box, and it starts creating the folder structure, starts creating all the items on the right hand side. And that process normally takes about 25 minutes, but it's provisioning a lot of infrastructure. So on this diagram, we've just got a simplified version of what's being deployed, but it's deploying a lot, particularly around kind of the VPCs and networking. And then once stage 3 is complete, then we can actually go on to a Chrome desktop and we can fire up the Eagle console, and we've actually then got a fully functioning landing zone, and we can use the Eagle console to provision more infrastructure, third-party tools such as logging if you're using Datadog, HashiCorp Vault for secrets management, for instance, so on and so forth. Yeah, so let's start off with the folder structure. So we create an opinionated folder structure. So it's basically split into the shared services folder, which is holding a lot of our infrastructure, and also the applications folder, which is where we deploy activators or the reference architectures. So within the shared services folder, we create shared VPC, and that's where we centralize all the management, the network management, and everything that we do when we deploy it. We deploy with internal IPs. So a lot of the time when you provision infrastructure, the default is to give external IPs. And so what we've done with the infrastructure is gone through all the kind of Google best practice white papers, which probably a lot of you have read, and we've turned that into the code. So we create the shared VPC, and then within the VPC we create a bunch of projects, which I think is kind of the light blue where the little Tim, if you wiggle the circle, that's where we are. And again, these are isolated projects. The theory here is least privilege. So we separate the projects, and different roles within your organization have access to just certain projects. So you might have network admins that's a role that we create, and they can only go into the networking folder, for instance. So moving down the list on the right, one of the other things that we do is that we, by default, the logging isn't turned on for a lot of the infrastructure that's deployed. So we automatically turn on enhanced logging, and that's very useful for seeing exactly what was deployed. We deploy things like Cloud DNS and Cloud NAT. Again, that allows the infrastructure to talk out to the network. And then towards the bottom, we have remote access. It says, remote admin, and that allows you to securely log into the Bastion host and administer the network. Now, we use that remote admin until we have got into the Eagle console, and from the Eagle console we can actually start setting up the WAN. So we can, from within Eagle console, we could either set up a VPN, or we can set up direct peering or a direct connection. So and then with GKE, so we deploy Kubernetes clusters, and we use the same scripts each time we deploy Kubernetes clusters. So we always make those highly deploy them across zones and regions, so they're highly available. And we implement things like secrets management via Vault and customer managed encryption keys. Again, on GKE, when we install, we've gone through all of the Google documentation to harden those clusters following best practice, and that's where the Eagle console resides as well. Other things that we need in the shared services, telemetry and billing. So telemetry, obviously, we want to see what's happening, and billing, we want to all of this infrastructure is tagged so that when it goes into we can then export that into BigQuery, and we can use some visualization tools in Data Studio to see our billing. Further on in the process in the Eagle console, you can then, if you wanted to, deploy third-party tools like Cloud Health and so on, which will give you more billing information. We install some links for IT service management. So out of the box, we can install an open source IT service management called ITOP. And that is what we use just to test our builds and our processes. And we install secrets management, HashiCorp Vault. Again, I think this is quite interesting. This was quite a lot of engineering work. We installed this on a highly available Kubernetes cluster. Obviously, if you're centralizing your secrets management, passwords and certificate rotation, etc., then that needs to be in a highly available setup. And finally, we do, alluded to earlier, key management, and we set up continuous scanning of the environment. So that's what's would happen in the unboxing. If we can switch screens back to Scott.
Thank you, Andrew. And yes, the marketplace deployment has completed. We're now going to connect to the Terraform admin server within the Bootstrap project. We're connecting via SSH, but we're also connecting via the Identity Aware Proxy, and this enables an extra layer of security to it checks that you are a member of the Google Cloud organization. So now we will kick off the script. This is going to take quite a bit of time to deploy. I hope it was over what took 25 to 30 minutes because, as you can see from the previous diagram, there are many components that are being deployed as part of this. I do have an environment that has been already deployed, but if we go back to the diagram, I can give you a bit more information about all the components that are being deployed whilst we wait for this script to complete. Okay, the demo live folder hosts the Bootstrap project that I deployed at the start of the demo. I deployed the Tranquility based application from Marketplace into the Bootstrap project to enable me to launch the landing zone unboxing. The unboxing takes approximately 25 minutes, so I have an instance that I prepared earlier in the demo folder. The shared services folder hosts all the projects that contain all the shared services. These host the typical foundational infrastructure services that you would expect to find in a traditional data center. The Bastion project hosts the Bastion server that is used to remotely access the cloud resources within Tranquility Base. Remember that Tranquility Base cloud resources are not exposed to the public internet. They are all connected to a private internal network. This includes the Bastion. Identity Web Proxy is used to add an extra layer of security. The shared networking project hosts a shared VPC that enables us to centrally manage networking. All firewall rules, subnets, routes, all managed through this project. It also hosts Cloud DNS for name resolution within the internal network, and CloudNet is used to control access to the internet. The application folder is home to the Activator projects that are deployed via Eagle Console. Eagle Console is hosted by the shared EC project and on a private GKE cluster. This is a nice segue into showing you the Eagle Console. First, I'll connect to the Linux Bastion using the Chrome remote desktop. Then I'll log into Eagle Console, and then I'll hand you over to Andrew to take you through the Eagle Console.
Yeah, so you can see, if I just take over, Scott, there's the shared EC. So that is the Kubernetes, that's the project that holds the Kubernetes cluster running the Eagle Console. So what Scott's going to do is just remote desktop via the remote admin and call up Chrome. So Scott, while you do that, there are a couple of questions I can just answer. So if you can just get to the login screen on Eagle, then I'll answer these questions. So Hayden, you asked, how would you position this with Anthos? Yeah, that's a good question. It kind of often comes up. So if you imagine Anthos is, is a great technology for managing or writing applications that work in a hybrid environment, so on-premise and Google, or in a kind of cross-cloud environment, Google and Amazon, for instance. So we would treat Anthos as an application architecture. So that fits within the kind of activator pattern, which I mentioned earlier, which is kind of reference application architectures. So Anthos is a GKE environment. It's a Google Kubernetes environment. But of course, in the landing zone, you need a lot more things to run Anthos. And in fact, what we have got is an event in June where we've extended Tranquility Base to actually create the footprint on VMware on premise to then automate the installation of Anthos. We also have, whilst we're doing a Google demonstration here, we have Tranquility Base that the team also building an AWS version. So that would allow us to build a cross-cloud landing zone from exactly the same process. Within the Eagle console, we could connect the two clouds together and the on-premise, and then deploy Anthos as an activator. So Anthos is the application, and Tranquility Base is the landing zone, the kind of the data center that you have to build in order to be able to deploy things like Anthos. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, feel free to have a follow-up. And then Andy asked a question, how much time do you save by using the script over doing it by hand? That's another great question. I think the estimates vary. I mean, what we talked about with Google friends is, I think if you really knew what you were doing in building this, it would take you several weeks. And if you weren't really using scripts, but you're doing it by hand, probably multiple weeks, maybe going into kind of a month, or 1 month, 6 weeks, something like that. If you're kind of a regular, I don't say that in a disparaging way, but a regular kind of engineer, it will probably take 2 or 3 months to do this. And I think if you were new to this, it could literally take 6 months or a year. And we know lots of people that have been spending a long time building their landing zones. Some people more than a year, some people even up to 2 years. And of course, the big problem is that the underlying infrastructure is changing very, very quickly. So the longer you take, the quicker it changes. The Google guys are always upgrading the software. There's probably 500 to 1,000 releases per year across their kind of product suite. So this script that we run would take, in normal situation, would take about half an hour. So it can save many, many man months of effort. And as we build out the Eagle console, so Scott, actually, maybe it's a good segue if you could log in. So we just remote desktoped into the Bastion host, and the Eagle application has been deployed, which back end is Kubernetes, and the front end is Angular.
I'll have to try again.
So Scott's just securely logging into the Chrome desktop that we automatically deployed. Then he'll log in. Right, success. Okay, so now we're into a UI. We've now gone beyond command line interface, and now we're into the UI. As I said, I'm not going to spend a long time discussing kind of Eagle, but of course you can ask questions. But this now allows us to step through and start building out more of the landing zone. So you can see immediately we're taken into the landing zone tab, and this is showing our progress. So the screens that you're looking at now, where we're concentrating all of our development efforts. So this is now work in progress. So we talked earlier about the folder structure that we created. We've created some elements of the LAN, but just quickly show you the WAN. So the kind of next stage, if Scott, you could click into WAN. So this would be the next step that we would go through. So here you can see you can either set up a VPN, a partner interconnect, or direct peering. And what these screens will do, so if you could create a new connection for VPN. So the next stage in this process is that we would connect a VPN back to your on-premise, and then that would allow us to start doing things like Active Directory syncing and working through the kind of integration steps. So you can hear there's some just kind of default dummy data in here, but we would go through these steps to create a VPN connection. And likewise, if you already had a third-party interconnect, something like Megaport, which we've looked at before, then you could go in and create it. So Scott, if you just go back to the landing zone screen, if you just cancel from there, and if you go back again, yeah, so you can see that the progress bar at the top is where you would now start setting up each of the items. So again, Anthos is an application, coming back to the earlier question, Anthos is an application that kind of sits at the end of this process. We need to set up our wide area network, and with with failover, we need to connect DNS. We need to do an Active Directory sync, so then we can start pulling roles and IAM policies and so on up into the cloud. And set up other things, logging and so on. And then we can't go into data center. That's not in this version, but within data center, then there are the kind of third-party tools that we would start installing. Things like ServiceNow, the integration to that, or Remedy if you have that, for ITSM. Things like if you didn't want to use Vault, you wanted to use different secrets management, Cloud Health if you're looking at billing, the Divi Cloud for continuous compliance. So those would be set up within the data center part. And then if you just do a quick sneak peek, Scott, on the activators, if you click on the activator store, there you go. And maybe if you just click in all, you just click on the all just next to category. So here, as we were saying, so these are opinionated reference architectures. So again, if you deployed these, which we won't do, if you deployed these, then they would, they're kind of pre-approved already by your security and infrastructure teams, and it's Terraform code that then deploys. So one of the clients we're working at, we're doing a global Kubernetes cluster, say with no single point of failure. So yeah, so I think I'm going to pause there. There was one other question, which was from Jatin. Could we use TB to build multiple landing zones in across other clouds, GCP, AWS, and Azure? Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly the ambition. We have teams that are currently working most advanced on GCP. But we also have a team that's building currently on AWS and trying to catch up. So within the Eagle console, you would actually be able to see which cloud platform that you could deploy onto. So in this screen here, there's some hard-coded demo where cloud platforms we can't actually deploy on Azure yet. But we're just showing the data that we can capture. But yes, you could deploy from this screen, you could deploy multiple regions from GCP, so you could create your landing zones in multiple regions, and you could deploy multiple clouds. Okay, I think, Scott, that's it for the demo. Hopefully it did complete, but I will hand back to Carl now just to wrap up. Okay, if we just go to, sorry, if we just go through the slides, yeah, I think, oh, sorry, it was me next, sorry. Yeah, so what did we see? Again, we quickly go through the steps. We prepared the cloud organization for launching. We just downloaded that quick script from GitHub, then we went into Marketplace, but that was deploying the initial baseline project. And then we SSH'd into the Terraform server that was created by the Marketplace process. And then that did would have done the unboxing of all of those landing zone components. Where we ended up was that we could then, that process can install a remote desktop, which we went into the Chrome desktop, and we fired up a web browser, and we connected to the Eagle console, which had been deployed running under Kubernetes, and that's where we could then further build out the landing zone. Okay, and the Eagle console will be a future webinar, which we'll probably do when we've all got high-speed broadband. Okay, Carl, cool. Back to you.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Scott. The future missions that we are listed, I think, was talked through as we went, but they're mainly now focused on building out the opinionated reference architecture. So you've heard the term activator. So if you can visualize the Eagle console and the little boxes there, then we're working on extending that that portfolio with the various different reference architectures on top of that. And of course, the open source community on GitHub is contributing to that as we speak. So if you want to get involved, you are much more than welcome to do so. And in fact, there was a meetup scheduled for the 31st of March next week, which I think we're turning into a digital meetup as well. So I think some invites will be sent out should you be able to or interested into getting involved there. I guess this is a section for questions and answers. I can see there's 3 that have been added to the console, which have already been answered. Tim, I don't know whether you've seen any more come through, or do we want to move on to this slide?
I think if people just want to raise questions, you can see there's a little questions box, and you can fire questions to us.
Yeah. But as and while you're typing or you're thinking of questions, by all means, we'll contact you afterwards, and at the end of the presentation, you'll see if you want to have a more specific conversation with us, then there's contact details to help you do that. But I guess the key takeaway is you've seen what we've built over the years, culminating in Tranquility Base, and you're probably considering from a business or a technical angle, is this right for you? So we thought we'd just list a few bullet points to try and highlight where we see organizations that have benefited or started to benefit from Tranquility Base, and that's the speed angle. They want to get workloads, build a proper Google Cloud home, a landing zone quickly in a robust and compliant manner, to then start to build out reference architectures on top of that, again in a repeatable, compliant manner. The other thing is to also move from dev environments into production environments and ability to roll back easily, rather than doing a POC then having to reinvent it when it's time to go to production. The other thing is as well is you may have the not the available resources to hand, whether that's inside your organization or whether that's the IT consultants or partners you work with. It may be that they're not readily available to start to deploy in an efficient way onto Google Cloud. Then this is a means to help you actually overcome that issue. Even with the skills and know-how, if you don't have that at the moment in time, then this is a great starting point to help you do that as well. And the final thing is to help better coordinate your team. So some of the big enterprises we're working with, they've got many teams spread across the globe, and you can now see how Eagle could help them coordinate in a more efficient way. Rather than duplicate effort or reinvent things from beginning, they can quickly activate the reference architectures from within Eagle, and knowing that it's already pre-approved, compliant, etc. So they're the areas where we think Tranquility Base will suit. There may be more, but that's how we are seeing it today. I can see there's another question popped up, Andrew.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you want to answer that.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Elliot has asked, so how much of this is proprietary software? The deployments are all performed via, Elliot continues, the deployments are all performed via Terraform script under the covers, but the console is code unique to TB, right? So no, actually everything is up on GitHub. So you could, if you wanted to, install everything yourself from GitHub, and we've got instructions up there. Obviously, it's a bit harder to do yourself than working with Google and GFT to do it, and we can bring people that can help train your staff. But no, all of the code is under Apache 2 license and can be freely used. And you go on to say, I work with regulated customers who will have a slow adoption process for any additional software. So getting them to approve Tranquility Base would be another significant step up front. So what we have actually found is that all of the customers that we're talking to, and they're quite a wide range of customers, some very big clients, they're very used to Apache 2 licensing, and they're used to open source code. So actually, from our experience, we've not encountered too much of or any problem there at all. And we're also very keen for those clients to contribute back into open source, and they've been very willing to do that. I mean, this is a problem that we're all trying to solve together, and there isn't really a huge competitive advantage from one client building their landing zone faster than another. Okay. Yeah, and I think there's another question here about pooling efforts and how that makes it secure. So I think a lot of clients that we're talking to are very interested in understanding how everyone else is baking security into the infrastructure. There have been a few problems with some cloud installs where there have been holes left open. And I think using something like this has been has been very beneficial when we've been talking to our clients. We are sharing experiences and sharing code, sharing skills amongst a much bigger team, and learning from some people who are further in front in the deployment of cloud than others. So again, we've put that in open source so that everyone can benefit. Okay, I think we didn't have any more questions come through while I was talking.
No. So thanks, Andrew. Yeah, thank you. It's the next slide, please, Tim. I think we have everyone that's subscribed to the webinar. Obviously, we'll contact you and we can share the slides with you. If you've got further questions, then please do feel free to contact. That's actually me on the slide there. So my email address, my mobile number's up there as well. So I guess not being physically available, it's difficult to meet up, but we're very happy to receive calls and emails, and I'll make sure whether it's myself or the right people are able to answer your questions effectively. The next webinar, you'll get notification on the Eagle console in action, and I think it's worth re-highlighting what Andrew mentioned earlier, the Anthos live webinar. Hopefully, if we're able to all sit in the same room together, you'll see Anthos moving from an on-prem environment up into the cloud and in real time. So we'll show you that as well. And if you want to get download the open source code, please go to tranquilitybase.io. You'll find the links to GitHub and some instructions there to help you get started. Or please do get in touch with us and we can help you do the same. The other thing I'd just like to say is thanks to everybody who's presented. So Tim, Bruno from Google, but also Andrew and Scott for the working with the technology. And actually, I believe what I took away a pretty compelling demonstration of what Tranquility Base can offer. So I guess, Tim, over to you to do the final close, I would have thought.
Yeah, so thanks everybody. Thanks for attending. Yeah, it was technically a little bit challenging with the broadband speeds, but I think we got there, and I think everyone can appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this. So yes, we will be in touch. We'll email out to everybody for an update, and we'll send answers to the questions as well. So thanks everybody, and we look forward to hopefully meeting you in person at some point in the future. Thank you.